Hello and welcome to Precon Decon, the video series where I deconstruct the pre-constructed decks of Magic the Gathering's history. In this video we're going to be looking at a Urza's Destiny pre-constructed deck, which is Battle Surge, which is a blue-red deck. It has a theme of haste creatures, which is an interesting theme for a blue-red deck. Normally we associate that with spells and things that interact with spells, like your non-creature spells. So it'd be interesting to see a sort of a different take on blue-red. So we have a deck list here. 23 creatures, which is a lot. 4 instants, 3 enchantments, 6 sorceries, 1 artifact, and 23 land. Mana curve off to the side there as normal. So let's dive into it. So we've got a lot of red creatures with haste, because that is the theme of the deck, is hasty creatures apparently. So 2 Goblin Berserkers, which is a 4 mana with first strike and haste. That's 2/2. Goblin Warbuggy is a 2/2 with haste and echo. Thundering Giant is a 4/3 with haste. Wild Colossus is a 2/2 with haste. Keldon Champion is 4 mana for a 3/2 haste with echo. When it comes in, deals 3 damage to a player. I think that's honestly the best out of this whole lot of them, really. Goblin Berserker is actually pretty decent. Viashino Cutthroat, which is a 5/3 with haste, but it goes back to your hand at end of turn. And then Viashino Sand Scout is a smaller version of Cutthroat, say 2/1 with haste, but it goes back to hand at end of turn. So, lot of haste creatures. Keldon Champion, I think is probably the best out of the lot of them, just for having that 3 damage when it comes in. I think I've sort of mentioned it before when talking about Echo when looking at these decks, but a creature with Echo really benefits from having haste, because it means that you can play it, you can get some use out of it, especially it has a enters the battlefield effect like Keldon Champion does, and if it has haste you can attack with it, you get a use out of it there. And then if you don't want to pay the echo cost next turn, you don't have to, because you've at least gotten some use out of it. Whereas if you just play like a big creature without haste and no effect, you're essentially having to pay for that creature like twice, and maybe not getting full effect out of it. But I say we've talked about echo and haste and all those interactions quite a lot. So one of the rares of the deck is Goblin Marshal, which is quite expensive at 6 mana for a 3/3 with Echo. So when it enters the battlefield or dies, you get 2 1/1 red Goblin creature tokens. So there is a potential here that you play it, you get some goblins, and then don't pay the Echo cost, and it dies, you get 2 more. So 6 mana for 4 tokens, which is like not a great deal, obviously. But at least it does something when it comes in and when it dies, which I feel like most Echo creatures should do, just in case you don't want to pay the Echo cost. You get some benefit at least, and I know I'm kind of sound like a broken record, but that's how I feel. And then weirdly a lot of birds in this deck. So Kingfisher is a 2/2 flyer. When it dies, you draw a card. Thieving Magpie, 2 colours and 2 blue for a 1/3 flyer. When it damages an opponent, you draw a card. And then Raven Familiar, which is a 1/2 with flying and echo. I'm not going to talk about. I promise, I'm not going to talk about echo anymore. When it enters the battlefield, you look at the top 3 cards. You basically draw 1, and the other 2 go on the bottom of your library in any order, which I think is quite good. I've really flip-flop on Raven Familiar. Like back in the day, I wasn't sure if it was good or not. But yeah, these days looking at it, I think it's okay. So that was all our creatures. So we're going straight into some red removal spells. So Parch, which is, I feel like, a weird choice to include, but it's 2 mana for an instant, does 2 damage to a creature or player, or it does 4 damage to a blue creature, which is it feels very weird to include it in this deck. Arc Lightning, nearly a full playset of that, which is nice. 3 damage divided as you choose amongst any number of creature or players. Potentially very good, because you can 3 for 1 stuff for this, which makes it really good value. And then Jagged Lightning, which does 3 damage to one creature and 3 damage to another creature. The downside being that if there aren't 2 creatures in play, you can't play this. Or if your opponent's only got 1 creature and you've got a creature, you've got to target one of yours. So, it's not, maybe not ideal. Curfew is just a weird symmetrical bounce spell. I'm not sure it really synergizes too well in this deck. I suppose you've got a few creatures with enter the battlefield abilities, like Raven Familiar, like Keldon Champion. Yeah, so maybe Curfew wouldn't have been too terrible in this. 2 fatigues to make a player skip their next draw step, which is, I mean, it's a very ghetto time walk, I suppose. But yeah, that's fine. Again, like a weird card to include, I think. But it's fine, I suppose. And then Trumpet Blast. This is what there should have been more Trumpet Blast, because you've got so many creatures who are meant to be, who've got haste and are attacking. A few more pump spells would have been welcome. And then we have Ether Sting, which is an enchantment. Whenever one of your opponents plays a creature spell, Ether Sting deals damage to them. That's all right, I suppose. Sort of punishes. Like, do you wanna play creatures to block my creatures with haste? I mean, if you do, you're gonna take some damage. Mark of Fury is an aura that gives haste, and end of turn it goes back to your hand, so you can give it then something else, give it to something else next turn. Kind of not needed in this deck, just because so many creatures have got haste. Yeah, I mean, like, you could put this on the various birds you've got, or the Goblin Marshal, I suppose. But it's a weird card to include when you already have so many things with haste. And I guess I'm going off a little tangent and talk about haste. I recognize that haste is like a good ability, being able to attack and use something the turn you play it. But the thing with haste is, like, you use it in that turn, and then it has no effect. It's essentially like a dead keyword, which is why it's like, I always feel like spells or abilities that grant haste aren't usually that. I mean, yeah, I'm not saying they're not useful, but I know, I just wish haste did had some effect beyond like the first turn. Like, what I really like is in Throne of Eldraine, which is years and years later after this set. But there was the gingerbread man creature, Ginger Brute or something, which, like, it had haste and it could only be blocked by creatures with haste, which I think is like an interesting interaction. It means that haste matters more beyond the first turn. But I'm going a little off topic there. Gaitu Warcry is, I think, quite an interesting enchantment in that it essentially gives your whole board fire breathing. Or not exactly, but the fact that you can have that line there, and if any of your creatures need that fire breathing ability, that extra pump, then you've got it there. I just think that's like a pretty good enchantment to have. Like, I'd be worried about, like, if an opponent attacked with a bunch of creatures, had a bunch of red mana open, and they had Gaitu Warcry, because, like, it's so difficult then to know how to do blocks, because, like, oh, if something's unblocked, that's the thing that's going to get that Gaitu Warcry. And if you, like, block small creatures with big creatures, they can just do, okay, well, Gaitu Warcry to pump it up. So just kind of leaving it there on the table is a really good sort of deterrent there, and a good kind of like mind game to play when people like to mess up like combat maths. And then the other row in the deck is Urza's Incubator. So 3 mana. When it comes into play, choose a creature type, and creature spells of the chosen type cost 2 less to cast. So that does affect your opponent as well. It is a symmetrical effect, which is kind of not ideal. But then this is normally going to be played in a deck that can abuse it a lot. And I'm not sure why it's in this deck, really. I mean, I suppose it makes it can make, you've got quite a lot of goblins, I suppose. You also, as I said, you weirdly have a lot of birds. So either goblins or birds is a fine choice for Urza's Incubator in this deck. But there's things like with goblins, a lot of the goblins are quite cheap, so you're not really getting that much benefit from the Incubator. I don't know, just seems like a weird choice for rare for this deck. Yeah, and we're straight into what could have been, because weirdly this deck didn't have any of these cycling non-basics that like pretty much every other precon have had, which is weird. But yeah, what could have been? So a bunch of red spells, I think, could have just made this a bit better. I'm kind of leaning towards like maybe this deck should have been mono red. But I don't know. I just don't think the blue elements of it contributes a lot to the overall strategy of just play haste creatures and attack and win, be very aggressive. So Avalanche Ride is just a really good creature with haste. And Echo destroys lands. Shivan Raptor is another creature with haste and first strike. And again, it's got Echo, but at least you can attack with it, get a use out of it. Flame Jet is just a burn spell. Weirdly templated. You maybe can't see it too well here, but um, it has the cycling ability first and then its rules text, when in all other cases cycling comes after the rules text. So it's just a weird like anomaly. I don't know if it's like a printing error or something. Falter. I think this is really good actually. Falter 2 mana to creature that flying can't block this turn. I think that's just a very, in a deck where you've got like a lot of creatures on the ground. I think that's just a very strong ability, just to take away all blockers on the ground. And then Bloodshot Cyclops, I think, could have been a sort of a fine rare to have here. Sacrifice a creature, does damage equals that creature's power to another creature or player. Yeah, I think that's a fine, would have been a fine rare to have. Yeah, if you're Echo creatures, I'm going back to Echo again, but if you've got Echo creatures, you don't want to pay the Echo cost. It's all right. Cyclops can just chuck them at someone. So yeah, that's what I think. So overall, I think this deck I think it's okay. I do think it would have been better being mono red. But yeah, overall I think it's okay. I mean, it's fairly straightforward. You just have a load of haste creatures, you attack with them, and just use burn spells. And it's just very straightforward. And it's interesting to see sort of a blue red version of that, because blue red is usually more about doing stuff with spells and interactions with spells. But yeah, I mean that's what I think. I mean, I didn't have this deck, but did you have this deck? Did you play it? Was it good? Did you have to make changes to it? What changes did you make? Did you make it mono red like I think it should have been? Stick a comment below. I'd really like to hear. I'll be back next time to look at another Urza's Destiny pre-constructed deck. But until then, thank you for watching and listening, and have a good day.